Hi, guys.
Oh, hi, Mitchell.
Hi.
Today we're visiting December 7th, 1941 again. I'm sorry.
Again.
Maybe I can get a tan. I don't know.
Today we are doing Cookie Pocket. And that's it. Episode
Yep.
62?
Three, I think.
60 something. Anyway.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, today we're doing Pearl Harbor 2001. All three of us were we were anticipating this for a long time. We've been waiting for this day for years.
It's
and
true.
Yeah, I know you guys are very excited to talk about it, and it was the best 3 hours of my life. It's a romantic war drama film directed by Michael Looks Cool Blow It Up Bay, produced by Bay and Jerry Bruckheimer, and written by Randall Wallace. It follows Ben generic Southern accent Affleck and Josh 2000s era schoolgirl crush Hartnett and a love triangle with Kate crying with makeup for two boys Beckinsale. This is covered mostly in the beginning and the end. John Publicly Defy Polio Voight plays FDR. I don't know if I can say this next. I'm going to do it. Okay. Alec Blanks Only Baldwin leads the Doolittle Race.
No.
Mako / Uncle Iroh plays Yamamoto. Cuba Big Bicep Badass Gooding Jr. plays the famous USS Arizona's Doris Miller. Hans Makes Cheese Intense Zimmer does the score. Also, Pearl Harbor, the movie expected, happens in the middle, in Bay fashion. So what did you guys think about this film?
Well, I think I liked your poem more than I liked the film.
Thank you.
What I will say, this movie wasn't as bad as I was expecting. I've seen bits and pieces of this movie, and I've seen a lot of different reviews, and I always came away with the thought, boy, I hope I never have to watch that movie. And I've seen 90s Michael Bay is weird for me because I like The Rock, and then I have never managed to sit through the entirety of Armageddon. Because it literally makes me motion sick because he never stops moving the camera.
Yeah.
That's still a problem with this movie, but this is probably the more bearable version of Michael Bay for me, where I at least get kind of involved at times, and not all of the action is CG, and there's at least an attempt to keep things sort of grounded and tangible. Mm-hmm. Like, there's an attempt. It doesn't always succeed, but there's an attempt.
Yeah.
I think the main issue with this movie is it's far too long. Mm-hmm. I mentioned this in my review that I put on Letterboxd and Twitter. I think Michael Bay is great at, like, Eisensteinian, like, classic Soviet montage where he shows you, like, symbols and iconography that you associate emotion with, and that's kind of how he relies on an audience getting invested, because his characters are paper thin. Mm-hmm. So much of this movie, I think the reason it fails is that he's trying to stray away from that iconography sometimes in favor of you being invested in his characters, but there's nothing there.
Yeah.
There's nothing for you to actually relate to in the love triangle or become invested in, and that means that so much of this movie is kind of just boring. So it's a 2 out of 5 for me. Like, I think filmmaking wise, he sort of achieves everything he set out to achieve. I can't necessarily fault him on his style because I don't like it, but he does what he wants to do well. I just find it so impossible to, like, relate to that or become interested in it in any meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I tend to agree a lot. This is my first outing with Michael Bay. I haven't even seen like Transformers or anything. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's very surprising.
Jeez.
Yeah, I know.
Heck of a start.
Yeah. And at first I was kind of like, oh, okay, these shots are kind of neat with the kiddos and the crop duster and the what have you. And I was like, oh, this is kind of like a warm orangey. I can vibe with this color. And for a second I was like, oh, okay, maybe this will be okay. And then the kids, like, they have that fight with one of the kids' dads, and then he's like, get off him, you German, or something. And then he's like, you just called me. I fought the Germans. And then it's like, oh, this is like an emotional, this is like important, like, dialogue meant to signify something now. And this man's having like a very serious conversation with like I don't know. It was just very, like, I was like, oh, now he's not being Michael Bay anymore. But except he still is, because he can't quite be what this scene calls for. And there was a lot of that. Like Zach says, the characters are just so like reduced to their base ambitions, I guess. I'm sure I've mentioned at least at some point on this pod that I have the most bizarre mostly hate relationship with Ben Affleck. And this was certainly not a love outing with him. Not to say that he's bad even. Like, I think he fits the mold of the character fine. It's just like one of those things, like his face. Ugh, Ben Affleck, you know. I don't know. I on some level, I have to credit this as like, I don't think it's like horrid. I gave it a 2 out of 5 like Zach. I think it could certainly be worse. And I view it as sort of like a cultural moment, I guess. Like in 2001, I think audiences are significantly different than they are now. And like going to a movie theater to spend 3 hours watching like a melodramatic romance war action-filled fest is probably a more tantalizing thing to do than now, just because of, you know, at the time this was made, and people have different priorities now, and that's fine. But just purely as a film, I there just wasn't enough for me to latch onto here. So 2 out of 5 for me.
All right, so this isn't going to be like a final countdown thing, all right? I pretty much agree with everything you guys said. I have watched this so many times throughout my entire childhood. And the more I know about Pearl Harbor, the worse it gets for me. But that's kind of with any movie that even remotely attempts to portray a historic event. So the biggest issue with this film, and the one that I've seen recurring in pretty much anybody's criticism of it at all, is that, which is kind of what Zach touched on, Zach pretty much went into it, and then Christian touched on, is the trying to not be Michael Bay, basically. Trying to have this romance be the center of attention amidst this event that happens. And the event has almost no correlation to the actual romance at all. And the problem is that it's not a romance movie trying to be a romance movie. And it's just, everything is based around this extremely simplistic, like literally every cliche, love triangle. And using Pearl Harbor as a backdrop really doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can pretty much just use any like perilous scenario at all, and it would work the exact same way. And I don't really, maybe it's like Titanic vibes mixed with like what happened with war movies after Saving Private Ryan, where there's just relentless attempts to try to have these romances match like the success of Titanic, but also like the grittiness and the horror of Saving Private Ryan, especially the opening scene. And it's just an uncomfortable mixture all the way around. Like, the actual action sequences, which are for me, I feel like should be like defining the characters in a way that like Dunkirk does, where like the characters don't really need to be fully developed or have relationships yet until the actual events kind of like bring that along. Like Band of Brothers obviously does that, like almost nothing like anything else in terms of World War II stuff I can say definitively, where the events plus the characters kind of bond together simultaneously with the events. But like, I mean, this is just for that, at least from the romantic, mixing that with the war drama standpoint, I think it's just like the worst possible way they could have done it. But I will say that the second act is great. I love the second act a lot, and I love the way they did the action. I love the way that they portrayed the actual like events that were happening, even though we'll talk about this later, like the historical inaccuracies are here and there, and like you can obviously tell there's a little bit of Hollywoodish stuff mixed in there. I feel like the effects
a little
yeah. Well, I mean, so like from like portraying Pearl Harbor accurately standpoint, I don't think it's that bad. I really like, it's not like We Were Soldiers or like I just used 2 Mel Gibson films, The Patriot or something like that, what it was, but Braveheart for that matter.
All written by the same guy, by the way.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And I think it was portrayed really, really well. I think it's one of the best Pearl Harbor portrayals, like from an actual action, like, note by note standpoint. I think it works great. And Cuba Gooding Jr.'s Doris Miller representation was good and relatively accurate, and all that was fine. But it was just the actual movie was not about Pearl Harbor. That's the biggest problem. It was about these three characters in the love triangle, and that's the biggest detriment. But going on to the romantic parts of it. What kind of orders? The top secret kind, the dangerous kind. I'm very entranced right now. So for today's standards, the triangle has three sides. Are Rafe and Danny just best friends? Netflix special? Anyway, Beckinsale claimed that her romantic scenes with Affleck were filmed late in production, which made it hard to kiss him on the lips without laughing, since the two of them had gotten to be friends during the shoot. Affleck agreed that it was awkward, akin to kissing his sister. So, do you think this film is more of a romance or a war drama, and how much does it hurt the events that occur?
Oof. I think it's trying really, really hard to be both, and that's why it's 3 hours long, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, I don't know. I've liked Beckinsale and Affleck in other contexts. I just think it really boils down to the writing. The dialogue is just so bare bones, and not really in like an impressionable way for me. Like it's. Oh my gosh, I can't even recall any specific lines, but it just felt like they may as well just say, I like you too, and then start kissing, and that could be the whole scene, It's just like...
Hans Zimmer intensifies.
Yeah, no, they do really depend on the score, and when they're alone together, and they show us, like, they have, like, 5 back-and-forth interactions, I'm like, how do you people not get bored of each other so quickly? You'd have nothing to say to each other, ever. And I don't know. And I just wish that it chose to be an action thing. And I think in the way that it sort of decides to be focused around the characters more so than, like, I don't know, a historical drama portrayal of the event at large, at least certainly in the first act, it's more character focused. I found myself caring much less about the action. And I've never been someone that finds action boring. I know there are some people out there that find like nonstop action boring, but I do depend on some sort of connection to what's happening. And I mean, even when they're displaying like the atrocities, I understand the gravity of the historical moment for sure, but I just felt like I felt nothing, man. I just felt nothing. I was like, it was brutal. I don't know why, because I could sit there and acknowledge that the action was like well directed, and certain moments I could say were cool, but I think just like the total disconnect from how archetypal to the extreme the characters are, to the point of being so not individual, that I just I didn't feel any like peril or suspense with regard to their fate at all, I guess.
I certainly feel that way about the leads. I do think, strangely, Ben Affleck is kind of an appropriate choice for the lead in this movie, because at least I feel like he fits the part. Because the lead character of this movie, I think, has almost been deliberately written as just the square-jawed 1930s Hollywood leading man who has nothing to him other than the fact that he's
a flyboy,
handsome, ? And flies around. I do agree. There's so little to. Again, it's one of those things where I feel like Michael Bay isn't really able to get into his characters' heads, and so much of the time in scenes where his characters are falling in love or flirting, he relies on the imagery rather than the dialogue and the character. But at a certain point, you can't rely on that for a romance. Like, oh gosh, what is his name? Josh Hartnett has even less to him than Ben Affleck. Oh my God, yeah. To the point that at certain points, I forgot he was even in the movie. I was like, is he going to come back? Oh, wait, there he is. He just walked around the corner because he was inside. Like, scenes with him and Kate Beckinsale interacting are so empty. Like, they don't have, like, quirks or fun interactions or inside jokes. They have, hey, remember that time we had sex in a parachute hangar? Like... And sure, that's an interesting thing to depict. and sure, that's an interesting thing to show on screen, but at some point you have to convince me that these two people actually like love each other, and the only way you're going to do that is through their interactions. I was so much more invested in the romance between, I don't remember his character's name, but the guy who plays Spud in Trainspotting, the guy who stutters in this movie,
Yeah,
and his
that was
girlfriend.
That was cool.
Yeah.
Than I was in either of the two leading characters, because this is going back to something they did in Hollywood films in the 30s a lot. There seems to be this understanding that your leading characters have to be these like perfect, beautiful people, and like the side characters are the ones who get like the unusual quirks, or get to be kind of nervous around girls, or get to be sort of the underdog. Whereas I think I'm just gonna call him Spud. Spud is like
His
more
name's
of
Red.
like a Red. There we
Yeah.
go.
I like Spud
was
more.
almost there.
Spud
But
Red.
he's more of like a modern, relatable romantic protagonist, because he has those uncertainties, and he has things maybe that about himself that he's kind of shy about or doesn't necessarily like about himself, and therefore he's more relatable, and you kind of understand where he's coming from, and you root for him more than Ben Affleck and Josh Hartnett, the Golden Gods, or whatever they're trying to be.
Yeah. And then his fiance gets completely murked by 50 cows from a zero
Yeah.
straight. That was
Yeah.
awesome.
As soon as they just like brush the hair.
Yeah.
away.
Oh no! Oh, I told her Ben Affleck had a cute butt. It's so sad.
But you know what?
What?
I was
You think he has a
mildly
cute
sad
butt?
about that.
Oh, okay.
I was mildly sad about that moment. I mean, not really for her. I don't really think she's much of a developed character, but at least I was like, oh no,
Yeah.
Spud is going to be devastated.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Right. I totally agree. I mean, yeah, I mean, when we like talk about like the visuals and everything, and like visually portraying a romance when there's like you just pretend they're not talking, and you can just imagine them saying things, that would be a lot better. but like lorem ipsum script.
If this movie was a photograph, it would be much better.
Yeah, I mean, it looks great, especially being 21 years old. I mean, that's pretty solid plane shots, and I think for Baldwin and Hartnett and Affleck, they were trained like basic flying, so like when they're doing those actual like the regular flying shots and they're filming them inside the cockpits, they were actually flying them, and it was only until they were actually like flying, like maneuvering instead of just going in a straight line, was when the actual pilots would take over. So I thought that was pretty interesting. You can definitely tell. But yeah, in terms of like, I mean, I pretty much can't say anything you guys haven't already said. I think if you've seen the movie enough times and you know what you're anticipating and you know like when the actual event's gonna happen, I feel like in general you're just gonna enjoy the movie more because you know what's gonna end up happening. Because for me, I was anticipating the actual event to happen. I was anticipating like, I just the love triangle thing is just so. I mean, it couldn't have been more overdone, honestly, when it comes to the saturation of it. And I totally agree. I mean, it's not really much investing to be invested in, but like, just the like when I was talking about like just having no sound or anything and not hearing them talk, like the train scene, like when he's actually describing like what was when she was describing what was happening and everything like that, and he was talking about it. I thought that was like a cute thing, you know. It was like a cute little interaction. It's just like, and all the like the setting and like where they are and like the set pieces and everything, I think are all great. Like, I mean, you're not gonna go totally wrong when it comes to Beckinsale and Affleck in terms of their relationship, but it was just the writing just completely tanks everything, and it's not even like their acting capabilities. But and in that, I feel like for Christian especially, you get immediately fatigued, and you don't really want to invest in the movie as a whole because of that, and I can totally understand that perspective. But going into the actual action, you guys got your freaking final countdown Pearl Harbor thing you wanted. Thanks to ILM.
Hey.
Disney ordered.
I did wonder if they did the effects on
Yes, they did. And Disney ordered this to be a PG-13 movie, so they had to change a lot of stuff to make it PG-13. They also asked for a $200 million budget, but they got 140. But that's still, I think that was like one of the most highest cost movies at the time.
I'd imagine, yeah.
In 2001.
Yeah.
The total amount of money, fun fact, spent on production and promotion roughly equaled the amount of damage caused in the actual attack, which a lot of people were using as like a main criticism of the movie.
Yeah. I can see that being in a headline.
Yeah. So the film has 4 pure CGI shots. The bombs falling towards the Arizona, 2 shots of the Arizona exploding as it jumps up in the water, and the 2 zeros pitching down towards the battleship row. How good was the action, and you feel like it lived up to your expectations in terms of like representing this really intense ambush, I guess, immediate attack, and seeing a lot of civilians and sailors die and stuff?
I guess from a purely technical standpoint, I would call it impressive. Certainly, the laddies at ILM never disappoint. But like I said before, I couldn't really connect with it. So action, well choreographed, well directed, well realized action can often just be like empty bodies like crashing and moving and exploding. But I think my 2 out of 5 is largely the credit in that 2 out of 5 largely is to the technical triumph. So like in terms of CGI, I didn't find it very noticeable ever, which is a pretty big deal, I think, for something two decades old now. So technically impressive, but like we've said about the dialogue, I just couldn't invest in it myself.
I think from a directorial standpoint, I think the action in this movie is fairly well done. I mean, it's significantly better than like modern Michael Bay action. A big criticism that he gets with the action in things like Transformers and even in stuff like Six Underground, which he made more recently, is that the camera never stops shaking around or moving around, and they're constantly cutting. Like you get like shots that last for half of a second, and there seems to be no patience with anything. There's like no time to breathe in any of the action, which is kind of a vital element of action. You need time to sort of wonder what's going to happen next, and then it does happen and you're invested again. I mean, I feel like at least this obeys those rules. There's kind of nice semi-suspenseful shots in the action in the middle of this. I mean, I think the shot where the bomb is dropped on either the Arizona or the Oklahoma, I can't remember which.
I don't remember. I think it's Arizona.
But where you follow kind of the bomb all the way down,
Yeah.
you know what's going to happen, but you still are following it. I think that's a really good shot. The
Yeah.
shot where you see the 2 sailors painting the side of the ship and that torpedo kind of goes under them, and there's just a moment before it hits and everything blows up. That's a great shot. I mean, I can actually tell what's happening in frame, which is a marked improvement from something like Transformers, where you just see kind of pixels spinning over each other all the time. I think the action in this is, and I like to see, there's only really one CG shot in this that like took me out of it, and that's when the battleship jumps out of the water.
Yeah.
That's the one where I'm like, okay, that's clearly CG. I can see how smooth everything is. But I like mostly how practical everything is. You can see the explosions. But I do really agree that from a directorial standpoint, though it does work, in order for action to work on anything beyond a technical, theoretical level, you need to actually be invested in the people that it's happening to. And for the most part, I really wasn't. I mean, sometimes there'd be like a character that I kind of liked who'd crop up. If I saw like Michael Shannon hiding under the desk, I'd be like, oh no, I hope he doesn't get hit. If I saw Spud running after the planes, oh no, I hope he doesn't get hit. And then there were a couple times where I thought, I kind of hoped that the newsman with the camera didn't get hit, but that was mostly because I thought the idea of sort of viewing the action through the camera in certain shots was interesting, and I wanted that to keep up. So that was more of a technical reason than an actual I cared about the character reason. But I think for the most part, the action in this is significantly hindered by the fact that the characters might as well just be like little army men running around in like a child's play set, and you don't really care if they get flipped over because there's like 40 others that look exactly like them that are ready to run on after them.
Yeah, I also feel like the precedent already set by the fact that you know that you have to be focusing on the protagonist the entire time is a total detriment. Because like I'll use Dunkirk as an example again. Like the main characters in that, which nobody can even name probably, are
I can't.
Harry Styles.
Harry Styles.
It's Tom Hardy.
Yeah, Tom Hardy. There you go.
Tom Hardy is in Dunkirk.
Yeah.
All right, there we go.
He's one of the 3.
Isn't he like the main pilot?
Yeah, he's the pilot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and I was gonna use 1917 as a reference, but I feel like it's 1917 works in that the premise is already set from the very beginning, like why they're important and why we're following them, and that's all you really need. Do we really want to know or care about Ben Affleck? Like, we already saw him fake death already, so that even hinders it even more. And we know for a fact Kate Beckinsale's not going to die. R.I.P. Harnett. And then the Doolittle raid also was very. It was very not well integrated in for pace wise. I don't think it really worked. Like, having Pearl Harbor happen, and then have everyone talk about the unsung heroes of the Doolittle raid right after doesn't really work for me, especially from a historical standpoint.
The third act feels like it should be a sequel.
Yeah.
Like, everything's so choppy and kind of rushed.
Midway feels the exact same way. Midway, oh my god, I didn't even start on Midway. But right, yeah, it's really the precedent. And if I start forgetting that the first act of the movie happened, the more I start enjoying the actual, like, dogfighting scenes and things that are actually based on real events too, by the way, the two pilots and everything. They were actually, like, just coming from a dinner party, and they were calling the airfield, telling them to get 2 of the P-40s ready to go just start fighting the Zeros. I think they downed like 6 or 7 in real life. But then all of a sudden they're a part of the Doolittle raid, which doesn't make any sense. And, you know, but anyway, I really enjoy the action sequences when I'm forgetting what the movie's actually about. And yeah, there's a lot of, like, you know, over romanticized, like, patriotic drama and stuff, but I was expecting that. I think anybody going into this is expecting that from the get-go, and it wasn't really that forced, in my opinion, compared to other movies, but still, it doesn't help to have that in the middle of the action, and it kind of reminds you, by the way, this is a Hollywood movie. Also, don't forget about the love triangle thing, and those two, like, constant reminders for me just definitely hinder the action, the effectiveness of the action, so I can pretty much agree with you guys on that there. So yeah, going into the actual historical inaccuracy. So, for the average person, just from the get-go, I'll give my opinion. There's really not a lot you'll notice. Like, from, like, just anybody who just generically knows about Pearl Harbor or generically wants to learn about it. Like, this is a pretty fine. Like, there's nothing that's, like, radically wrong that's completely gonna change your perspective or anything. Like, in general, you get a sense of what happened. But FDR shows his disability in public, which is just terrible. There's, like, tens of thousands of photographs of FDR, and only, like, 2 of them are when he's actually in a wheelchair. Like, almost nobody knew that he had disability at the time. I think that's a pretty well-known thing. There's plenty of modern vehicles and warships. Crop dusters didn't exist until, like, the 30s, so that didn't really work. The radios and the radio towers picking up plane comms didn't make any sense, especially from hundreds of miles away. That technology didn't exist yet. The Japanese targeting and bombing a hospital didn't ever happen. There's actually American vets and people that witnessed the event that were mad that they portrayed the Japanese like that, which is interesting. And then the Doolittle raid only really showed the bombing of Tokyo, and there's a strafing run that didn't happen. This is in the top 10 for the most historically inaccurate films of all time, and, like, a number of publications. How much of this affects the film's quality, in addition to, like, the exaggerations you already talked about?
Well, I'll confess, like you sort of opened with, average viewer me didn't really have any perspective on what was accurate and what wasn't until you just now revealed it. Yeah. But I was certainly at least distracted by how, like, non-dynamic the scenes with the Japanese military officials are. Yes. They're just kind of like, we need to attack the United States because of that's what we need to do, and then they do it.
But how?
How will we attack the United States?
Cut.
So I mean, gosh, and I don't want to say that. Were they to go the historical route, I don't want to say that you need, like, a really well executed character drama for me to be invested in, like, any sort of historical war movie. I would certainly not, because I understand, like, the massive historical personal implications of the actual event. But I think what got me messed up was not historical inaccuracy, but sort of the decision to lean into the 3 characters instead of the event itself. Like, the event is sort of framework for this relationship drama, I guess.
Yeah.
And so when we get to the action, it feels more like the third Matrix movie, when there's just like all these robots like flying at each other, and like there's none of it matters. And instead of being like, if we were less, sort of like what you said earlier, Mitchell, if you take away the first act, and if it's a historical drama, I feel it more because I feel like the context more. But it's almost working against itself with the relationships and the dialogue and whatever. And I don't think the performers are awful, by the way. I will just say, like, there are moments where Kate Beckinsale has truly putrid lines of dialogue, and she at least like makes it seem like something a woman would say out loud, which is like a genuine accomplishment in certain places. I was kind of like, oh, okay, I can't believe she made that sound like something someone could actually say. So partial credit to the performers in that regard, at least.
And Cuba Gooding Jr., when he goes like, ah, and then runs away. Ah, I gotta go shoot him down. Ah!
Yeah, so I don't know, the crop duster, the technological stuff, that's not really the stuff that distracts me in terms of historical inaccuracies. Yeah. The stuff that does, and I think it's mostly because I knew about it ahead of time, is the fact that the Japanese didn't aim at civilians or the hospitals. Yeah. Which, to me, it just kind of nags at me, because it feels like... One, it feels like a lazy way to be like, ooh, boo, look at the bad guys, don't you not like them? It becomes another, like, iconography thing. Look at the women and children running away! Like, and that becomes the way that they communicate everything. Yeah.
Not just
but
the men,
it's also...
but the women and the children.
But it's also... it also bugs me because, like, you didn't have to do that. Like, to get people in the hospitals, you could have easily just had them come in and be overrun because they're coming from the ports. So, and there's a massacre happening there. You can even kill Spud's girlfriend by, I don't know, maybe she's walking along the docks or something and it's early morning. Like that doesn't have to be in the movie. It's entirely there as, like, a way to communicate, oh, don't you dislike those Japanese? And additionally, I feel like... I don't know what I don't know who Mako is meant to be portraying in this. Is he Yamamoto or is he someone else?
He's Yamamoto.
There's seems to be like a half-baked attempt to portray him as like a reluctant pacifist or something, because he has the line about like, oh, a truly brilliant man would find out how to avoid war, and then they never come back to that at all. There's like a lot of
like that.
there's like a lot of things that seem there to they seem like lazy little ways to like pluck at the audience's "do you feel something" strings, and then they like never go back to them, and they don't really like flesh out upon them in any meaningful way. They're just there as like, don't you feel something? You should feel something. They're there to get the reaction out of an audience that you want from like a typical action movie when you're portraying like a historical event that actually happened and lots of people actually did die. Yeah, I feel like you shouldn't go for those like emotional buzzwords like you would in a typical Michael Bay movie.
And big brain historian Zach knew about the criticism of the Japanese meeting outside. That was offended a lot of people. A lot of Japanese people were offended by the fact they're meeting outside. And there's just, I mean, yeah, like the little things. It's interesting to me how many things they were like, how many liberties they were willing to take, because it kind of just. I mean, I understand, like, this is a production, like, knowing the production versus actually watching the movie, but I do feel like, in this case, when you're portraying a historical event, there is some context in that regard that needs to be understood. And I feel like just how many liberties he was taking just made me feel like he was trying to... I'm not going to say he was trying to profit off of a tragedy, like, to make a romance movie, but in a sense, he was kind of doing that. And... I wouldn't go as far as to say it's disrespectful, I guess, because there's definitely, I mean, this was obviously, portrayed in a pro-America light. Like, it's not like it was trying to make Pearl Harbor look bad. But at the same time, like, I don't know. It's hard for me to try to, like, accept it as a movie named Pearl Harbor when it's really about the Hollywood romance parts. And this is like Christian mentioned, it's like the period, 2001, and me and Zach were also talking about the the fact that this was made before 9/11, which is interesting because there's a lot of movies after 9/11 that were very much in the same vein when it comes to like patriotism and stuff. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, I don't really think the historical inaccuracies are really a huge hindrance, even though there are a number of them. I totally agree with you guys. I feel like the meat and potatoes of making a good drama are definitely hurting really bad. And you kind of get to the point where you don't really care, even if you know about a lot of stuff. Like me and my dad, my dad walked in, he kept watching this the entire time. Hi, Dad. But he was like, that Jeep. I was like, and he was like, yeah, that's like a '50s Korea War Jeep, right? I was like, yeah, that's a Korean War Jeep. I knew that. But yeah, I don't think it's that big of a deal. And something like Dunkirk or 1917, I feel like it would be a lot more like important when it comes to trying to achieve the accuracy of an event happening. But obviously Pearl Harbor isn't really about Pearl Harbor, so that was pretty much all I had to say. We can wrap up and go on to our thingies.
Okay,
cool.
So final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think I phrased my real overall thoughts pretty well in the opening. It's a bizarre, borderline like fetishization of like American history.
Yeah.
And yeah, you were saying, like it feels a lot like something that would have been made after 9/11, where you have a lot of movies that are sort of about Uncle Sam getting hurt and then strapping on his boots and taking names.
Mm-hmm.
Since this came out before 9/11, it does feel just bizarrely like Michael Bay really, really loves America and the military and wanted to portray that in the film.
Yeah.
I mean, good on him, I guess. I'm not going to fault him for it, but I think it's very difficult to connect to and relate to as an actual historical drama of any kind.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. And I don't think any of it's like vile and offensive.
Yeah.
Even necessarily to Japan as a nation or Japanese people, despite the unnecessary historical inaccuracies, which, like Zach said, it's just like why even do that when you don't need to. But I don't know. I feel like this wouldn't even be that bad to me if it were just like a brisk 90-minute like excellent action sequence, historical inaccuracies, but kind of fun. But my goodness, it's 3 freaking hours, man. It's so long. My gosh. If I weren't watching it for the pod, I really might not have finished it because it is just so long. And I here in the sunset of my life, I value every second, every precious moment left in every day, and I can only take so much of Ben Affleck's face on any given day. So,
I kind of agree. Those teeth are too perfect for me. Get out of my house.
And it's not terrible, you know. I think it's a shame that it's much easier for me to talk about my negatives and my positives, but that's just kind of how this one landed for me. I don't think you're a terrible person or you have terrible taste if you like this. I could totally see the appeal. It just didn't quite land for me and my own priorities. So
and
that's fine.
There was one other movie comparison that I wanted to make. Enemy at the Gates, which we all watched together. Very similar criticisms, actually. The romance in that is pretty throwaway. Pretty much doesn't have to do with what's happening. And Stalingrad is a fine... I mean, that works great as a background for a sniper duel, and I think it totally works in that regard. We've talked about the criticisms for that. But a lot of people were criticizing Stalingrad when it comes to historical inaccuracies. I mean, portraying the Soviets, it was pretty... like that was a pretty negative portrayal of them when you're looking at the actual like that event itself, and like killing people, like killing them if they retreat kind of thing is a very like known myth and stuff, and it's just stuff like that. I mean, but then again, that movie was not trying to attempt to portray Stalingrad. It was kind of in the beginning, but then it's used as a backdrop for the back and forth between the characters they're trying to develop, and I feel like that makes a lot more sense than in this case when like Pearl Harbor is the backdrop. Like there's no arguing your way around it. Like the movie's not about Pearl Harbor. That's like the worst part about it for me.
Enemy at the Gates is also much shorter.
Yes, Enemy at the Gates is much shorter. Yeah, and the action sequences in that are pretty unique and memorable for me.
The dialogue is standard but not basement level, and so the performers can do a lot more with it, I think.
Right, and the romance is kind of throwaway, but it's not shoved in your face every 5 seconds. It's not about the romance, obviously, and I guess it like adds like 0.1% to Jude Law's character. So, so yeah, I give this a 2.5 out of 5. I think it's totally worth trying for anyone who likes World War II movies. I think anyone who does has pretty much seen this. This is kind of like one of those Hallmark World War II movies people have seen before. That just reminded me of Hartnett's quote. I think World War II just started.
I know you meant Hallmark in another sense, but I do think it feels like a Hallmark movie.
Romance does feel like a Hallmark movie. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that, oh my God. There's Hallmark freaking Silent Night is a great, I recommend that. That's a Hallmark movie. And I still think it's pretty solid when it comes to character development. But anyway, yes, 2.5 out of 5. Let's go on to our stuff. We can review, right?
Yeah, we can review.
Not crazy.
Well, since I'm speaking, I'll jump in first. Right before we recorded this episode, I've been watching a lot as usual, but I watched Ken Russell's Gothic, which is not a very well remembered movie. Ken Russell is mostly known for his stuff that he did in the 70s and the 60s, stuff like The Devils and Altered States, which we very nearly watched in the first season of this podcast. But Gothic is it's about the notorious holiday that Lord Byron and Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley and John Polidori spent at Via Diodati in Austria, I think, where there was a storm and they had a brainstorming competition and decided we'll come up with different stories, and Mary Shelley notoriously came up with Frankenstein, and this is like a fictionalized version of that where they have a seance and think they summoned some kind of a demon, but maybe they're all just high, because you never actually see the demon, and they're taking like a lot of laudanum and drinking a lot, which they quite possibly would have done. They were known as these very kind of upper class socialites who may have done a lot of that. That might be how they partied. But I do think, I mean, it's a pretty typical Ken Russell movie where it's not subtle at all. There's a lot of psychosexual content that is somewhat interesting, but also somewhat overplayed. And it could definitely be better lit. Those are kind of the 3 hallmarks of a Ken Russell movie. And it's really the performances that make a Ken Russell movie. And here, he's got some great actors. He's got Timothy Spall, he's got Gabriel Byrne, but they never quite give you much. And none of the characters are really especially likable, and a lot of them don't really have aims or goals, so you can't really relate to them all that much. It definitely picks up toward the end, where there's a lot more kind of gothic, interesting nightmare imagery that comes into play, but it definitely lags, and I would say that if I weren't someone who's so interested in that kind of imagery, I probably would have quite heavily disliked this. It was a 3 out of 5 for me, but that's like a very middling, okay, maybe check it out if you're a Ken Russell completionist. I wouldn't really recommend it for most other people.
Right on. I don't know what else to say to that. I feel like, I feel like I always end up using my week in review segments for TV and movies in the hopes that they will stay movie focused. But you all have thrown in so many music recs over the time that I'm giving up. I'm not talking about a movie or a show.
Here we go.
I'm talking about a video game. I'm talking about Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga. I'm doing it. I'm sorry, Mitchell. I'm sorry, Zach. God. I'm doing it.
No, I've never even heard of this game.
Of course you
have. It's incredibly fun. It's been out for like about a month now, I think, and it spans the Star Wars, specifically the Skywalker Saga films, episodes 1 through 9, prequels, originals, sequels, and it certainly is heavily inspired by the complete saga, which was then 1 through 6, and sort of emblematic of a lot of Y2K childhoods out there, mine included, and they've sort of innovated a lot of the gameplay and what have you. The combat systems are new. There's sort of like a third-person shooting type deal with blaster characters and different character classes that keep it very engaging. And it's just very, very fun. It's stupid fun. I've been spending a lot of hours playing it. I finally unlocked Yariel Poof several yesterday, I think. They put so much work into him. They gave him voice lines and everything. You've got your own like side mission dedicated to helping him out, and Max Rebo has voice lines and his own side mission too. So I think there's some developers that know about the robot chickens out there, because they really gave my
Max
Mean Boys
Rebo.
some spotlights. Yes.
Max Rebo.
The blue elephant?
Yes,
Zach, this is a very
but
big
he
game.
already told you he's not an elephant. Zach.
This is a very
How
big
does...
game.
Okay, when I was a youth, I had a stuffed elephant that was green, and his name was Gada, and he looked exactly like not Yariel Poof. That would have been freakish. He looked exactly like Max Rebo. So don't tell me he's not an elephant.
He's not an elephant. He's an ortolan, and he's well, you know what type of music he plays. Anyway, it's an excellent game for anyone that manages to have a game system out there. I think it's on PS4, PS5, the Switch,
Xbox One,
PC.
Xbox Series X.
Thank you, Mitchell, for reminding me what the new Xbox is. Okay, cool.
I can second that. I played through all the story mode, and I didn't sell out to TT games yet, and I didn't buy any DLC quite yet, but I probably
I did.
will.
Sorry.
I know Christian did.
I don't know what's going on.
I definitely a huge homage to the original Star Wars games, amongst other homages you wouldn't have even expected to be in there, and they're in there. Definitely like the biggest Star Wars game, probably, except Knights of the Old Republic can get pretty big too, but probably not as big as this. Like the roster wise, like second to none. And for a Lego game, it's probably one of the best I think they've ever released. The only criticism I have is the difficulty. I feel like they should have a difficulty slider or something, or a difficulty select, and maybe a hardcore mode. Like if you die, you have to start the entire level over or something, or something like that would have definitely enhanced the game. Otherwise, I think it's fantastic and pretty much a no-brainer for anyone who still plays Lego games and they're 20-something-year-old. So, so I'm gonna keep the positive vibes up, guys. I'm gonna talk about Bowling for Columbine. So, I'm not a huge Michael Moore fan.
Get hype.
Get hype, yeah. I'm not a huge Michael Moore fan. This is definitely, known to be one of his best works, and I totally agree. It is very compelling and very easy to get invested into what he's saying. It's up to you whether or not you want to believe what he's saying and what he's trying to portray based on, like, heavily anecdotal evidence and, like, kind of hopping from one situation to another and trying to build a narrative for himself to kind of make a political like speech out of it every single time. But in terms of like actually like discussing the events and talking to real people and going to actual places and actually putting in the work to want to talk to people that were involved in the politics and the narrative behind representing Columbine and the actual events and stuff, I think that's totally fine. I think it really does work. I would not really call it a documentary, but I definitely see what he's trying to say, and I do not agree with him politically, like I said, but I'm not trying to put that as a part of my review. You have to get used to Michael Moore's style, pretty much, is what it comes down to. And if you're not really like understanding what he's trying to like set out to do from the get-go, then you're not really going to be very satisfied, especially if you like heavily politically disagree with him. It's going to be really distracting. It's just going to feel like he's preaching and trying to take advantage of a tragedy and things like that. But I definitely think it's really compelling, and I was like hanging on to every word for every interview. I thought it was really interesting. Like, I'll give you a great example. Charlton Heston was like a speaker for the NRA for a while, and there was 2 different shooting incidences when the NRA had talked directly after the tragedies, and Michael Moore just goes to his house and just starts bombarding him, just starts asking him like, why were you doing it after these tragedies and stuff. Obviously that interview does not end very well, but it's very compelling. It's like reality TV that's not really reality, pretty much. And I really enjoyed those kinds of interviews and things, and I don't agree with what he like was saying in those circumstances, but I'd see what he's trying to say, and it's not nearly as like, politics today obviously is a completely different monster than it was in 2002. So I definitely think it's worth a watch and kind of getting a sense of the period after Columbine and how people were thinking. So yeah, is this Munitions Minute now?
Yes, it is. I have the
Nice.
minute timer ready.
All right. Pew pew. Too many pew pews to count in this one. Go ahead, start, Zach.
Uno, dos, tres.
All right, we're going to be talking about the Ma-Deuce. It's called the Ma-Deuce because it always gets the final word. It's the M2 Browning. The M2 Browning, 50 caliber, is used on many aircraft, including the B-25s that are shown in this and the P-40s. They're used as on fixed wings, and they're also used as flexible turrets, which we see a lot. Actually, for a while, the Geneva Convention, people were kind of interpreting certain parts of the Geneva Convention where we're saying like that guns like this shouldn't be used against civilians, or not civilians, sorry, obviously not civilians, against ground troops because it's so destructive. So for World War II, generally there was a lot of saving ammunition, and so instead of using it on ground troops, that was the real reason why to save ammo. Was for anti-aircraft because it's great at ripping apart thin metal and wood frames and things like that. So that was like their main purpose for a while, and they're still used today. The second longest service weapon in the U.S., right next to the M1911 pistol. So there you go.
All right.
I
And those
tripped
are the
up,
ones
but-
they replaced with broomsticks, right?
Yeah, a lot of planes to save weight, they replaced them with black painted broomsticks. So it still looked like they have guns there from a distance.
Okay. On
So-
we move to the marvelous cinema tour then.
Yeah, chugga chugga choo choo.
Yeah. I watched another one. So this time it was I can actually say this week now because we were publishing these weekly now.
Terrence
instead of
Howard
bi-weekly.
is gone.
Terrence Howard is gone.
R.I.P.
And apparently a high-ranking executive at Marvel said they could replace him with anyone because all black people looked the same. So that's not a great look for Marvel.
Why didn't he just get
But,
Obama then? That would have been great.
Moving on.
High school.
This week we're talking about Iron Man 2, which, like I said last time, I hadn't seen this since I was like 9 years old. So I remembered it being quite boring, and I do think in some places it sort of is. There's a much more of an attempt to discuss the political and social impacts of the introduction of Iron Man in this film than there is in like any other movie, really, which I admire it for going for that. I don't really think it hits that nail on the head especially well, and it's not really a problem that the movie solves at all. At the end, the same problem is there, but they have just kind of ignored it, and another conflict has taken place that is solved, and then I don't think it ever comes back up again in any of the other movies, so that's a little frustrating. But I think that Sam Rockwell and Mickey Rourke make great dual villains in this one. I really like the energy that Mickey Rourke brings to his performance here, and I think that's partially because Mickey Rourke just sort of seems like a dangerous person on his own. I mean, he was like a boxer as well as an actor when he was in his prime. And he does sort of feel like I would not want to be an intern on that set because if I got his coffee order wrong, I don't know what would have happened. But I do think the action in this is also a lot more dynamic and interesting than in the first Iron Man, even. I kind of
Really?
like this movie more than the first Iron Man. in places.
Whoa! Wow.
Mostly because of its climax.
And because of the board.
Because this does not, because of the board in Russia. This doesn't have the problem that the first Iron Man does, where the climax is just Iron Man fights a bigger Iron Man. It has a much more dynamic climax that a lot more character comes into. And I think the combat is also, it's so much gutsier and dirtier.
Yeah.
And when you see, like, Rhodey and Tony at his birthday party just slugging it out, it feels like it hurts.
Yeah.
And it feels like they are actually getting hurt and they're actually causing damage, which is not something you really get from later Marvel movies where everybody just sort of seems to be invincible, and you can hit them and throw them as far as you want and they'll just go ow or say some other quippy line. I feel like there's actual consequences in this one. It has interesting villains. I like the action. I like how there's still a suggestion of violence. It's not as sort of flattened out and PG-13 as later Marvel movies are. So for those reasons, I prefer it to the first Iron Man. That might be kind of a Temple of Doom versus Raiders situation for some people. But it's my personal preference. So yeah, 3 out of 5. I don't think it's perfect. Like I said, I don't think it hits a lot of thematic notes that it's aiming for, and it does have pacing issues, but I enjoy it.
This is fascinating.
Next up
This
is Thor, which is another one that I remember finding really, really boring when I first saw it. I saw this one the year it came out, which I think was 2010, or maybe even 2011.
Yeah, I think 11.
Yep.
And I remember my biggest criticism coming away from it being that not much really happened. Which, thinking back on the plot, I'm not sure if I'll agree with that, but I remember 11-year-old me was like, he went to the desert and he fought a big statue and then he left. What is the point? So we'll see what I think of that one.
That's definitely how you sounded when you were 11 years old.
Maybe with a bit more of an accent. But yeah.
He went to the desert and he fought a statue and then he left. What's the point?
Thank you for humoring me, Zach.
You know, I can take direction like the best of them.
Yes, sir. All right. Huzzah. We're done. Pearl Harbor. You never have to think about it ever again, Christian.
But you do. You thought you could escape.
Survey says.
Yes.
Survey says
Oh, you've
what?
been chosen for a top secret mission, Mitchell.
No.
And you might get a medal, but we're gonna send it to your parents, not you. Alrighty, it's Pearl Harbor rundown. We
I'm very
grill Mitchell with thingies. Zach, are you prepared to start this one?
I am prepared to start this one. Just give me the cue.
Alrighty, let's do it in a 3, 2, 1, go.
You're so beautiful it hurts.
4 out of
It's your
5.
nose that hurts.
4 out of 5.
I think it's your heart.
4 out of 5.
Ben Affleck's stupid face.
2 out of 5.
Stuttering.
3 out of 5.
Using German as an insult.
3 out of 5.
Booty vaccinations.
4 out of 5.
An entirely unacceptable use of military aircraft, sir.
5 out of 5.
Booty vaccination booster shots.
4 out of 5.
Red Squadron.
4 out of 5.
Sleeping with your best friend's gal.
2 out of 5.
Leaving your goddamn hula shirts at home.
4 out of 5.
FDR standing.
5 out of 5.
The disappointment of Ben Affleck's survival.
4 out of 5.
Cook gunner.
5 out of 5.
Dead blonde friend lady.
1 out of 5.
Weird flabby John Voight chin.
1 out of 5.
Coca-Cola bottle blood.
2 out of 5.
Dan Aykroyd for some reason.
3 out of 5.
Josh Hartnett as man.
2 out of 5.
1 second.
Kate Beckinsale as woman.
4 out of 5. Damn it.
Oh, okay. I made a couple of typos in here, but we mostly
Oh my goodness.
got through it.
All right, ladies and gents and others, we have finished
We
the
have.
episode. Who's
Who's next?
Oh, I guess I am. Good one.
Yeah.
What did I say we were doing?
I think we're going to breakfast.
We're going to breakfast at Tiffany's with Audrey Hepburn and also Mickey Rooney. Which we'll talk about that. But no, for the most part, I think it's a stylish classic for a reason, and yeah, we'll get into it. There's a score by Henry Mancini. It's kind of fun. There's a little Moon River. There's a little it's a lot of talking. It's a lot of dialogue. So I'm a little worried that you or Mitchell might be bored, but we'll see. We'll see. We'll dig into it.
Okay.
It'll be fun.
Alrighty.
All right.
That's goodbye, I think, right?
Goodbye,
guess
guys.
so.
I'm going to go die
Bye.
off in a war.
Good riddance.
Sayonara.